The Black Death was a horrifying bacterial disease that killed 75 to 200 million people in Europe and around the world. But why was it so dangerous? There are three main versions of the plague. The bubonic plague is the best known version. The bacteria Yersinia pestis gets into the body through the bites of infected fleas. The plague bacteria makes its way to the nearest lymph node, a part of the immune system that creates white blood cells. The infection of the lymph nodes caused buboes, which was when the lymph nodes swelled up to near baseball sizes. However, other than this symptom and a general feeling of sickness, the bubonic plague served mainly as a staging ground for further infection. Not that it was a fun infection, it definitely wasn't. It just wasn't as deadly as the other varieties. The second version of the plague was the pneumonic plague, occurring when the plague bacteria spread to the lungs of the plague victim. This is the only form of the plague that can spread efficiently from human to human via airborne droplets released when an infected person coughs or sneezes, something that tends to happen a lot when your lungs are filled with plague bacteria. This version of the plague, like the bubonic plague, causes fevers, chills, headaches, and general feelings of weakness. It doesn't stop there, though. Those infected suffered through difficulty breathing, rapidly developing serious pneumonia and hemoptysis, which meant they coughed up blood and bloody mucus. Someone infected with the pneumonic plague wouldn't have to deal with their symptoms for long, though. The plague bacteria quickly caused respiratory failure. A person could get the pneumonic plague in the middle of the night and never wake up. The third version of the plague, and the most widespread across the body, is the septicemic plague. The bacteria spreads to and multiplies in the bloodstream. Like the other varieties of plague, the septicemic plague causes fever, chills, headache, and weakness. When the bacteria and their associated toxins are present in large quantities in the blood, the body initiates a dangerous immune response that ultimately works to kill the victim. The immune response is characterized by an abnormally high heart rate and an unusually high or low amount of white blood cells. Blood vessels all over the body become inflamed. Unfortunately, this inflammation only serves to put more stress on the body. The constricted blood vessels cause clots, and blood vessels all over the body randomly burst. The blood from these broken blood vessels doesn't stay in the body. The victims begin to bleed from their mouths, noses, and other places. The heart quickly becomes overworked and begins to pump slower, causing low blood pressure. Blood can no longer reach the extremities of the body, and necrosis begins to occur. The fingers, nose, toes, and other parts of the body, potentially deprived of oxygen, begin to die and rot. The lowered blood pressure, combined with clots blocking blood flow, deprives organs of oxygen and nutrients. The organs switch to anaerobic respiration to prevent their deaths, but this only can work for a short period of time. Lactic acid, a product of anaerobic respiration, is released from the organs, adding to the acidity of the blood. The combined acidity of the blood and the organs being deprived of oxygen and nutrients causes the death of tissue all over the body, causing what is known as multiple organ dysfunction syndrome, otherwise known as total organ failure. So, can you see why people were so afraid? The plague is still scary nowadays. Imagine what it was like when people had no idea what was going on.
From 1346 to 1353, a disease known as the Black Death spread across Europe. It was one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, and around 75 to 200 million people died as a result. We now know that it was caused by oriental rat fleas living on black rats that were migrated from Central Asia on merchant ships. However, during that time, there was a large amount of mass hysteria concerning the outbreak and spread of the disease. One of the biggest theories pertained towards the Jewish community. Many groups blamed the Jewish community because they suffered a lower mortality rate from the pestilence than the Gentiles. There was also a mentality of anti-Semitism because of past allegations of the blood libel. Blood libel was an accusation that Jews kidnapped and murdered the children of Christians to use the blood as part of their religious rituals during Jewish holidays. Anti-Semitism was also caused in part by Jewish deicide. Jewish deicide was a common belief in Christianity that laid the blame for the death of Jesus on the Jewish people. And lastly, Jewish conspiracies for world domination. Many groups used the argument that the Jewish community was poisoning wells and potable water resources to spread the disease. All this hysteria and frenzy caused many massacres of the Jewish community over time. People would justify these horrendous massacres by saying that the Jews were responsible for outbreaks of the Black Death, and that killing the local Jews would prevent the spread of it. One massacre was known as the Valentine's Day Strasbourg Massacre. About 900 Jews were burnt alive in Strasbourg, France on February 14th, 1349. It was one of the first and worst pogroms in pre-modern history. Hundreds were publicly burnt to death, and the rest were expelled from the city. Another massacre was the Erfurt Massacre. This massacre took place in Erfurt, Germany, on March 21st, 1349. From approximately 100 to 3,000 Jews were killed. Many Jews would set fire to their homes and possessions to perish in the flames before they could be humiliatingly lynched. One last massacre was known as the Basel Massacre. This event took place in Basel, Switzerland on January 9, 1349. The city fathers and administrators of Basel actually attempted to protect their Jews, but to no avail. Local guilds demanded their blood, and 600 were handed over. They were shackled inside a wooden barn on an island in the Rhine, which was set afire. However, a few young orphans survived, but they were forcibly converted to Christianity afterwards. There were a lot more massacres, such as the massacres in Aragon, Spain, and in Flanders, Belgium. All these events and massacres showed just how much hysteria was in the air during the time of the Black Plague. Many groups used the Jewish community as a scapegoat to blame the disease on, even though scientific evidence shows that it was spread and caused by the rats from Central Asia. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish people lost their lives due to the uncontrolled and irrational amount of mass hysteria.
Black Death had a serious economic effect on the people. Imported goods were inflated because of the difficulty and danger of acquiring goods. Trade mostly stopped as well, also because of danger. This also led to a small population, which meant less workers. Big landowners were forced to give higher wages in order to have them to stay and manage the land. Standards of living for peasants rose, even as people are dying. There was also a lack of workers to bury the dead. Since there are not as many people left alive to purchase food, the prices of food went down. However, wages remained high. This made the peasants gain money while the aristocracy lose money. This led to the creation of the Ordinance of Laborers. This law fixed wages at the pre-plague level and fixed prices for many goods. This was clearly in support of the aristocracy and hurt the peasants greatly, which led to the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, a revolt aimed at getting better economic conditions for the peasants.